Welcome to The Catch Up, a podcast from the Daily Catch where we take you inside the news. My name is Walter Mullen, and I'm the publisher of the Daily Catch.
And I'm Emily Sachar, the editor of the Daily Catch.
In this podcast, we discuss stories that have appeared in the Daily Catch. We give you insights into how we put the stories together, offer some additional observations, and discuss where the stories may be heading as we move forward. And as always, just a quick reminder, if you like our show, please be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite platform, and you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. So we start today's podcast with breaking news. There was a very sad story that took place overnight here in our area. Emily, can you tell our listeners what happened?
So very early Tuesday morning at about 4:15 in the morning, a motorcyclist traveling northbound on Route 9G collided with a horse that had gotten out from Old Adrian's farm in Statsburg, and the two collided. The motorcyclist, whose name is Craig Butler, he's 48 years old, lived in Statsburg, was thrown off the motorcycle and died at the scene. There were efforts to resuscitate him. They were not successful. And the horse also died. We don't know if the horse died at the scene or if he was later put down. I shouldn't say he, it's a she actually, it's a mare. Her name is Edna. And there were funeral services for Edna on the property where Edna lived with her caretakers and so forth. It's a tragic, tragic, tragic story.
I can't imagine hitting a horse with a car, never mind a motorcycle, at 4:15 in the morning on Route 9G. It's terrible. So Emily, we woke up to a tip about this story, but you didn't have much information when you started. How did you jump on the story and how did you track down the information?
Yeah. So we actually got a tip from several people. We found this story on Facebook. It was on a page called Whacker Wire, which is spelled Whacker Wire. And that site often jumps on news developments, criminal justice news developments, which they pick up from the scanner feeds. So we had very scant information, just that there had been a collision, that EMS, firefighters, and police were on the scene. And then we started hearing that the morning rush hour had been disrupted because police crews were on the scene and had blocked a stretch of the 9G roadway in order to reconstruct the accident scene. We've actually reported on this before, Walter, in the case of the young Vietnamese girl who was struck and killed on Route 9 a year and a half ago. There were efforts by the state police to reconstruct that accident. And when that work is going on, the roadway is completely blocked and traffic is detoured around it. So that was the next thing we heard. And of course, the immediate question I had is, well, where did the horse come from? Whose horse was it, and was there a rider? We wrote to State Police Public Information Office at Troop K, which I'm sure many of our readers and listeners have driven by on Route 9 going southbound or northbound, I guess on both sides. It's on the east side of the road. You see the Troop K headquarters. And we did get some additional information. We learned that there was no rider on the horse. And we learned that the horse had died, which was not initially available. And we learned that it was connected to a brewery, that there was some connection to a brewery. That brewery is called Black Snake Brewery. So absent the information that I was really seeking, which was how did this horse get loose, I began to look and call around to all the horse farms in the area that I knew. This was at about 9 o'clock Eastern time. And the first place I called was Southlands, where we have a number of sources, and they told me that it was not one of their horses. I asked if they knew. They did not. I then called some sources we have in the Mullin area. They did know who it was, but they did not want to disclose it. They didn't want to disclose the owner. And then later this afternoon, I got a tip from a source of ours who told us that the owner was a woman named Samantha Kuhn. And I took a double take because I know Samantha Kuhn from coverage that we've done of the Dutchess County Fair. In fact, it was her ex-husband who was involved in the pig pen fiasco that we wrote about and talked about on the show a little over a month ago. So my heart sank to learn that. I know Samantha Kuhn, and she's a lovely person, a talented horsewoman, an experienced horsewoman, an experienced horse owner. And it was just heartbreaking to hear this news. But then as the day went on, other people who I know in the Dutchess County fair world, other farmers, gave me additional information about the burial, how distressed the family was, of course, not just about the death of their horse, but of course that there was another death of a human being involved. So little by little, we were able to piece together much more for our listeners today and our readers in the newspaper to really be able to go a little bit more in depth with what had happened.
And we don't quite yet know why the horse got out of the pen or out of the barn, do we?
We do not know. We have some suspicions, or I should say, people close to the farm have some guesses, and these are only guesses. I want to stress that this is not known. But apparently, the corral, the pasture land where this horse grazes, was protected by a fence. And a great deal of thought and care, according to my sources, had gone into how to set that fence up and so forth. And it's very far, from what I'm told, from the road. So the thought is that the horse, this horse, there were other horses that did not jump the fence, that this horse got spooked by something. And that's what led it to race off the property and jump off the property. And one idea is that it might have been a mountain lion. There apparently are a lot of mountain lions in this area around where the farm and the brewery are. And it's possible that something like that may have happened. It's really inexplicable at this point.
Yeah.
And I know you and I have spoken earlier, Walter, about whether and why a horse would be let outside. I'm told that it's not usual or unusual for horses to be left outside at this time of year. It's a lovely time of year for them to be outside. Many farms have a way for horses to get in and out during the night if they wish to. So we don't really know more than that, but at least that's some guesswork as to what happened.
Are there any more facts we're waiting on for this story? Do you think we'll learn anything more or new, or are most of the pieces of the story already in at this point?
I think most of the pieces are new. I think the human interest part that we don't really yet have, we certainly would like to know answers to the question you just raised, which was what actually happened and why, and were other horses involved or nearby or that sort of thing. And I think we at the Daily Catch always like to talk to the owners in situations like this and possibly to the family, both families. It's the confluence of such a bizarre freak set of circumstances. But in terms of what actually happened as far as a police event goes, I think we have a pretty clear sense. We do also know from the police department, their report is that the motorcycle driver was not speeding and was not doing anything reckless with his motorcycle. It's just he came upon suddenly in the nighttime a horse. So you're going, I think that the speed limit on that stretch of 9G, I think is 55 miles an hour. So if you're traveling at that rate of speed, it's going to lead to a terrible accident.
This makes me think of the issue of the horse-drawn carriages in New York City in Central Park. And controversy about trying to ban them. Having horses that close to vehicles is just very tricky and very scary.
Very scary. Yeah. Really awful. So, yeah, I really am glad that we're able to give our readers more information than initially came out. And patience really works in a case like this. And you make connections, Walter, in this business, and you never really know how they're going to play out. Who would have imagined that Samantha Kuhn, who was the woman who told me a lot about what had happened at the pig pen the day that we had that little mishap over there, who would have imagined that 6 or 7 weeks later she'd be involved in this kind of situation? So her friends are heartbroken, and I'm sure her family is too.
So this past weekend, the Winnakee Land Trust held its annual barn tour, a fun event where participants visit historic barns in our area. And today we're talking about another interesting undertaking by the folks at Winnakee. I'm going to toss it over to you, Emily, and let you take it from here.
Yeah. So, Walter, I'm sure having spent time in the Hudson Valley, you hear about conservation easements, right? So Winnakee is one of the prime organizations in our area that helps organizations, and now it turns out helps people like you and me get conservation easements on their property. And we're going to hear all about how they do that and also about a new approach that they're taking to try to get people to voluntarily surrender their land so that Winnakee can actually take care of it. So we're going to hear about all those details today. We are so lucky today to have two team members from Winnakee Land Trust. We have Todd Waldron, the the Senior Program Director. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Emily. It's great to be here.
And we have Yuri Perrin, the Senior Director of External Affairs. Yuri, thanks again for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks so much for having us.
All right, so let's just start with some basics for folks. Yuri, many people have heard of the Winnakee Land Trust. I think you're kind of out of it if you haven't, right? If you're out of it, today's your chance to not be out of it anymore. What exactly does Winnakee do, or the main thing they do?
Sure. So Winnakee's mission is to partner with landowners to permanently protect natural landscapes with ecological, scenic, or recreational value that benefits the public. And we do this through land donations, land purchases, and conservation easements. And what that means in practice is that we protect places like Burger Hill and Fly Marsh so that they're permanently protected as conservation areas that can never be developed.
So, Todd, when we talk about easements and land conservation, tell our listeners exactly how that works. What does it mean to have an easement? How do you get an easement? I want an easement. Sounds fun.
Yeah, for sure, Emily. It's a great question. And one key takeaway, if you're a landowner out there listening today and you're interested in conservation, you have options. And so initiating a conversation with a land trust like Winnakee can help you explore some of those options. And a conservation easement is one of the options that you can entertain for protecting your land over time. Others are donations and bequests and sales. We talk through all of that in initial conversations, listen to your needs, and customize approaches that make sense for you as a landowner. So what a conservation easement is, it's a tool to protect land. And how it works, I'll use an analogy of like a bundle of sticks. And so say you have a property that you own. When you purchase a farm or a forest land property or a house, you have a bundle of rights that go with that property. You have about 5 bundles of rights. So think of those as like 5 sticks. And with those 5 sticks, you own it, there's possession of the property and control. You can, manage the property as you wish within the zoning and land use laws. You can, you have the right to enjoy it and sell and all of that. And so you have like all of those 5 sticks. And so what a conservation easement does is it transfers a couple of those sticks to a conservation trust like Winnakee, where we have kind of like a joint agreement where we work up with your attorney and yourself some land use restrictions on the property to keep it in natural open space, usually to protect from development if it's a core forest area or if it's important public space or a significant water asset. And so we then share those sticks. So you still have the right to own the property, to sell the property, to live on the property. But some of those protections are in place that are important to you for conservation values and important for the community, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's say, Todd, that the moment comes, I've put my property in conservation easement and it comes time to want to sell it. Do I then transfer that easement to the next buyer and they're similarly restricted in what they can do with the property?
Yeah, that's right. So that's how it typically works is there's a longevity to that and a protection in perpetuity. So those easements do transfer with deeds. And so if you're a landowner that's considering all of that, you want to have that conversation ahead of time with your attorney, with your family, with your accountant team. You want to make sure you're making an informed decision. And so that's what we can do as a partner. We're really a partner to that, to listen to what those needs are and the fact that conservation easements can be tailored to your unique situation. So there isn't like a one size fits all, Emily. It's really a listening session. It's dialing into the conservation values of the property, and it's coming up with a solution that everybody can be happy with and understand the longevity of it.
Okay. So I know in a minute we're going to talk about the new approach that you're taking. But typically, Todd, if I understand correctly, having an easement doesn't assure that anything's going to actually happen or there's not going to be necessarily care given to the property or special care given to the property. It's just going to kind of, if it's a pretty forest, it's going to remain a pretty forest. If it's a pretty stream, it's going to remain a pretty stream. But there's no management going on. Is that right?
Well, yeah, it depends. And sometimes there can be in certain easements, but that's it in a nutshell, very generally. And so I've heard Yuri talk about our program at Winnakee as we grow around addressing evolving challenges in forest care and forest conservation in Dutchess County and in the Hudson Valley in general, right? And so we have these evolving challenges that are taking place. We have invasive species, vegetation like barberry and buckthorn and Japanese stiltgrass and so forth. We have invasive pests like spotted lanternfly. We have regeneration problems, the new forests associated with deer populations. And so we have all of these issues that are somewhat existential to our forests. And so what we're trying to do is, along with those evolving challenges, is to develop evolving approaches to that. And that means like expanding our toolkits, reimagining how we think about forest care, taking an active hand in certain aspects of that, stewardship and restoration, still leaning into the land protection and preserves where it makes sense, but also addressing those big challenges head on. And that's one of the reasons I'm excited about being at Winnakee, because I think it's an opportunity to shape the future of forest care in Dutchess County and the Hudson Valley with a great team and with great volunteers and supporters and communities.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to hold one more minute on talking about the future. One question I have is, we talked about conservation easements a little bit. I notice when I go to these properties like Flea Marsh or Burger Hill or some of the scenic Hudson properties, there are trails and there are wayfinding signs and so forth. So that can also, I imagine, be part of still being in an easement, or is that something different?
Yeah, it can be. There can be a public access portion of easements depending on how it gets resolved and negotiated. And in some cases, like those properties like Bly and Burger Hill are properties that we own in our portfolio in whole. And so
Right.
public access is important, and connecting people in Dutchess County to land and our special outdoor places is important. I love those trails. It's one of the things I love most about our work at Winnakee is, just developing that connection for people.
So those are not properties that are in conservation easements, I take it then, if you own them outright.
Well, actually, Burger Hill has an easement from Scenic Hudson. So sometimes we can own them and they can have conservation easements. And there are a lot of properties like that.
Interesting. Okay. Well, maybe we'll jump ahead then and have you tell us. Last week, we wrote about Winnakee doing something new to enhance land conservation in the Hudson Valley. Maybe now's the moment for you to tell us what that is.
Sure. When we were founded in 1989 by Sally Mazzarella, the primary threat to these landscapes was development. And she and other community leaders like Drayton Grant helped to save places like Burger Hill. And a lot of what was behind that was really safeguarding the rural character of our region. And today, places like that are still super important to defining, why this is a place that so many people are drawn to and want to live. But as Todd was saying, the challenges of land protection have really evolved. We have invasives, we have overabundant deer who are decimating, our forest understories and people's gardens, introduce pests and pathogens. So we have to address those because protecting the rural character has really sort of changed, because those landscapes in 10, 20, 40 years are not going to look the same. Protection of land is not enough. And that's where Winnakee has really evolved to do an active stewardship model. So we can go in and remove those invasives, put up deer fencing, things that restore the natural regeneration of these landscapes so they could be protected, not only like as view sheds though, but also for biodiversity, for the wildlife. We do a lot of work. We have a wonderful biologist, Jen Adams, who does a lot of wildlife monitoring and habitat restoration. We target properties that are close to other protected lands so that there's wildlife migration corridors. And these lands are also crucial to our future climate resilience. They protect water quality, they sequester carbon. So really, this active land management has become essential to our work.
And how do you acquire these lands, Yuri or Todd?
Well, so It's really through relationships and partners primarily. We've been around for 36 years and we've become a trusted resource. We're an accredited land trust. So that means we go through a rigorous process at the national level for permanent land conservation. And we work directly with landowners. We do a lot of outreach. We do landowner programs on education about the importance of land protection and restoration. And then we have some incredible partnerships. We work with the other land trusts in the region. We're all very collaborative. We help each other. Dutchess Land Conservancy refers people to us that fits sort of our niche and our mission, and we refer people to them. Scenic Fly Marsh came to us through a relationship with the Nature Conservancy. So it's really sort of a lot of lasting relationships and partnerships.
I know, though, that our story, Yuri, focused on a couple who were essentially donating their land. Is that something that you're looking to do? And maybe you can talk a little bit more about how that comes to be, how that kind of process happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeff and Leola are sort of a gold standard for this land stewardship model. They are out there doing that themselves on their land. And when they were interested in donating their land to a land trust, they also happened to be our landlords. So the relationship there is one that we had a deep relationship. But they've been involved with Winnakee for, decades. But I think, were, as they said in the article, really attracted to us becoming long-term stewards of the land, and that was important to them. And we've had other landowners like Roberts Refuge in Hyde Park. That was a similar situation where they really loved our stewardship model and knew that we were going to be taking care of and restoring the land. These are places that people have loved for generations, and they want that. They want them to be cared for.
But that doesn't mean necessarily that there will be trails on their property or anything of the sort, just that you're going to continue to take care of it for them.
Yeah, some people want trails too. So some people want to showcase their property, but each landowner is different and we work with their wishes for the land. Todd, did I miss anything?
I think that's great, Yuri. Well done.
So sometimes I think our listeners are curious. You talked about buckthorn, you talked about some of the other invasives. What do you actually do? Like, if I were to go out there, what would I see on the property?
Well, like on the buckthorn, we have a project. We have several great volunteer projects available, Emily. So if you're listening and you want to get involved and get hands-on expertise and experience with just learning about this process, our conservation biologist, Jen Adams, has a wonderful volunteer program on a lot of properties. Like Jeff and Leola's property with the buckthorn, they're doing some removal there of the buckthorn, I think mechanically. And so there's that aspect of trying to get rid of some of those invasive species that are non-native to restore and regenerate and rejuvenate local and native plant and herbaceous species. So you'll see, some hands-on approaches like that. Lots of hand tools, lots of dirt on your hands, and out there, volunteers working together to clean up some of those invasives. We have trail building on our Roberts Refuge property, where if you're into trails and you want to get some experience with that, we have a weekly trail building session on Wednesday nights through the fall that Jen also coordinates.
That's fantastic. So how many acres are we talking about that might be eligible for this kind of active stewardship model?
Well, the wonderful thing about it, Emily, is that with our portfolio of properties that we have for conservation, they come in all shapes and sizes. And so if you're a landowner that wants to participate, whether you have a big property or a small property, there can be a place for that conversation. And we're really about high quality conservation impacts. And so, for instance, with some of the properties that we have that we own, those acreages range variedly. So Fly Marsh is 165 acres. It has this wonderful habitat component. It's an intact connection for turtles, and it's one of the biggest wetlands in Dutchess County. We have this incredible acid dwarf bog that's 60 acres with unique vegetation like orchids. Our Dutchess Gables property has American woodcock and New England cottontail and other important species, bird species for birders like golden wing warbler. And so whether you have 35 acres or a couple hundred acres, there can be a meaningful place there. The benefits that we work on are water quality and drinking water, like up at the Sawkill project in Red Hook. the biodiversity stuff at Bly and Dutchess Gables, the habitat piece, and then like connectivity with our Roberts Refuge property in Hyde Park. So it really comes down to those special conservation values and how we can work together and how it stacks up with the bigger picture. And we're always happy to have a conversation and try to come up with options that work for everybody.
So last question for you then, Todd. How do you identify these properties? Do you ask for people to step forward and contact you, or are you kind of omnisciently aware of all the wonderful places in Dutchess County and beyond that might qualify for this kind of program?
Yeah, I think Yuri can speak to this as well, and she might want to chime in. But, Yuri started talking about the partnerships and the importance of working together with our board of directors and our volunteers and the landowner networks and the programs that we do. And she can add a little bit about upcoming programs as an example of how we're connecting to people. But those partnerships are really important. And yes, everything's grounded in science. We're using tools to look at the conservation values, the forest connectivity indexes, and the habitat quality. And there's a range of tools out there, from landscape planning, from Department of Environmental Conservation to Scenic Hudson and the Nature Conservancy and others. So we're kind of blending science and community relationships there. And Yuri, I'll let you chime in from there.
Yeah, and also in addition to our active land restoration model, we also have really embraced landowner education programs to help landowners become stewards of their own lands. And we have some coming up this fall. Todd's doing one on Sunday about the value of hunting and overabundance of deer and how hunting and conservation and forest management can go hand in hand. We have one with the Wetland Trust at the end of the month about wetlands and how landowners can help protect those and the biodiversity within them. And we're working with partners like the New York Forest Owners Association, who also has a constituency of landowners on these programs. So landowner education has become super key.
Well, it sounds so important, the work you're doing, and thank you so much for doing it and also for taking a few minutes to explain it to our listeners. We so appreciate it. And any other important initiatives or programs that our listeners should be up to date on?
Well, our website has all of our upcoming events, but some of these landowner programs. We also have a volunteer day for buckthorn removal at Jeff and Leola's on October 18th.
All right. So check out winnakee.org. Is that the correct?
Yes.
Well, fantastic. Well, thanks again to you both. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Emily.
That was very interesting hearing directly from Todd and Uri. I think a lot of people don't really know what a conservation easement is. We think we do, but the details of it are actually very interesting. So that was great. Okay, Emily, let's close out today's show with our typical discussion question. I want to talk about the weather.
You always love, if it's not Amtrak, it's the weather.
If it's not Amtrak, it's the weather. So we've been going through an incredibly dry patch here in our part of the Hudson Valley. And we actually dropped a story last night about the dry weather. We're not technically in a drought. We're in an incredibly dry range, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, we're in the sort of pre-drought moment. So if we don't get some rain soon, we will become in a drought. And I didn't know this until last night, Walter, but there are many stages of droughts. I think 3 or 4. Readers can see that on our story. There's a map that shows the different levels of droughts. And some parts of New York State are in the drought already, but we are not here in the Hudson Valley.
So I thought it might just be fun to chat about what you and I are both seeing. I'll tell you what I'm seeing. I'm a little worried about my well here at the house. It seems to be running a little low. So I'm being very careful not to water too much. I did do some planting last weekend, but I'm being very careful not to overwater. That's one thing. And I think the trees are also suffering. Typically at this point, we see a lot more foliage in the area. It just hasn't happened.
Yeah, and our meteorologists were actually fortunate enough to have a meteorologist on staff or on retainer to the Daily Catch. And she tells me that it is possible that our fall foliage will not be quite as beautiful this year because the lack of rain apparently causes the leaves to fall off the trees more quickly. They brown more quickly. They drop more quickly. I'm sure, Walter, you're like me. We all wonder, what is it going to take to have a beautiful fall foliage? Do you think about that as much as I do?
all the time because I love the fall colors here.
Me too. And I think about it in January. I think about it in February. I think about it in summer. Are we getting enough rain? Are we getting enough sun? Is the temperature right to have a beautiful fall foliage? There just are so many factors. Of course, it's going to be beautiful no matter what. We're always going to have those yellows and beautiful oranges and reds, but we may not have quite the number that we're used to having this year.
And just to tie this story back to one other story, the story that we ran about the algae bloom in the Hudson, we think, or scientists think, that could also be a result of a lack of water, lack of rain.
Yeah, well, that certainly is. It's a lack of rain and it's also high temperatures, and that combination is affecting the trees and it's also affecting the water. So we need the water desperately. And we also need it, as you said, it's a life source, right? Without water in your well, it's very concerning. I'm curious, Walter, tell our listeners, how do you measure the water in your well? How do you know that it's running dry or close to running dry or that?
I call someone and bring them in and they do it. I have no idea. We've never actually faced this situation. Although the past few years, this has been the trend. It has gotten kind of dry and warm toward the end of the summer, early fall. We've never gotten dangerously close, but it's always something on the mind of a homeowner who has a well for water. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
So we'll keep an eye on it. This concludes our episode of The Catch Up. We hope you enjoyed listening. Again, if you like our broadcast, please be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite platform. A big thank you to Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud at Radio Free Rhinecilff for their help producing today's episode. And thank you to Esther Martell for her help with editing. Emily, always a pleasure catching up with you.
You too, Walter. Have a great one.